From Kishwar Rosha Ahluwalia to being Lady Kishwar Desai has been eventful. Her marriage to Lord Meghnad Desai made news, and with that began Kishwar's journey of self-discovery. A celebrated author and creator of the Partition Museum in Amritsar, Kishwar is now working on a museum in New Delhi. In this edition of HT's weekly talk show, The Interview, we bring you face to face with Kishwar Ahluwalia. Welcome to the show, Kishwar, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Kumkum, always a pleasure.
Let me begin by asking you, why this obsession with museums?
Well, I think this was an obsession which goes a long time back. When I was working in television, my first assignment was to go to the National Museum there, which I chose to do. And I think when you go to museums in school and college, you probably just go as a group and you're in from one door, out from the other. This time I had to make a whole film on a museum, and I think I really got fascinated by it. But the obsession with the Partition Museum, of course, is something else completely. It's because we've all grown up with our parents and grandparents and many others who were impacted very badly by the partition. And it was, I think, a great wound that never healed. So whilst I am very fond of the normal museums, but I think the Partition Museum, being a people's museum, being a museum which has all these stories and narratives in it, it is a completely different kind of an emotive feel when you go into a museum like that, which is all about how people migrated, how much they suffered, what their loss was. And it is quite shocking that it took 70 years for a museum like that to take place. And I'm still asked that why did it take so long? And all I can say is that whilst, we have so much history to preserve in this country, we are very neglectful of it, Kumkum.
When you say you were asked, why did it take so long? I would put it differently. Why did you do it? Because partition is all about blood, death, bitter memories. And here you are raking it up all over again and bringing it alive.
I think we look upon it very differently, Kumkum. This is the narrative which has been given by the Western historians, that partition was all about violence, partition was all about, aggression. But actually, partition was something that was imposed by the colonial authorities at that time upon a very innocent people. The people who migrated largely were non-violent. Their movement was entirely peaceful, and they always thought that this was something that could be reversed. Nobody at that time took partition seriously, in the sense they never thought that a space in which they had lived for so many years, sometimes for hundreds of years, they could suddenly be uprooted and sent off somewhere else. They were forced to do it. It was a forced migration. So I think the first thing we have to remember is that this is not about violence. This is actually what we call is a museum of love, loss, and longing. But of course, there are elements that take advantage of the vulnerable, and that is where you get the stories of violence. Second point I want to make is Mountbatten actually brought the date of the partition earlier. It was meant to happen in 1948. It may have given time for people to prepare for it. He deliberately brought it forward because of his own compulsions, So that's a very long tale, so we won't kind of go into that.
Kishwar, I get a sense that you or, creators of the museum are trying to rewrite history or erase history because violence was the consequence. When you say partition, it is synonymous with violence, it is synonymous with blood. So how can you change that? Of course, people wanted to live, it was forced migration, all that are side stories. The fact remains that when you say partition, the word in itself is division, divisive, and what followed was, as I said, blood, bullets, and violence. So why would you want to recreate?
We're not erasing history. Largely, if you look at the narratives, if you look at the painful stories, which is why we are trying to do these museums, this was our Holocaust, and unfortunately, many people like you think that this was only about violence. They don't realize about the great loss, the grievous loss that was imposed upon people. I'm not trying to change the narrative. This is all coming from the oral histories that people are telling us. These are narratives and stories which we need to remember, because when you divide, this is what happens. I think this is the key of the museum. This should never happen again. Never divide, because when you do, this is the kind of consequence we all suffer.
Yes, but those are political decisions, and we can never ensure that things like that. Well, I hope they don't happen.
Well,
but
nonetheless, even if they're political, they deserve to be documented. But these are people who came with very little, and I think I'm extremely moved the way they have come forward. And they cry when we record their stories, because they initially, they used to say in 2017, when we were setting up for the 70th anniversary, the museum, and they said, this is the first time anyone has come to us and asked us what we went through. And these are 80-year-old people, 90-year-old people on the verge of, you can say, almost passing on. So their narratives are so painful, and often their grandchildren don't know. We have so many people coming to the museum and saying, I didn't realize my grandmother had to go through all this. I didn't realize my grandfather suffered so much.
When you say that people or the younger generation came to the museum and said, we didn't know this, that our parents or grandparents suffered so much. I differ on that, because we all grew up listening to those stories. So really, the museum is not what you needed to listen to those stories. And if you didn't listen to them at home, then you were obviously indifferent to the pain that was going on, because we all grew up with that. So I'm not really very willing to accept that people went to the museum and said, oh, we didn't know this.
Okay. So to correct you on that again, is because not only in this country, we have had awareness raising events, both on this and on Jallianwala Bagh in the UK as well. And there it is completely shocking, because nobody there, whether it's a child, even an Asian child who's grown up in the UK, has no concept that India and Pakistan once and Bangladesh were once the same country. They start with that narrative, oh, we didn't know this. So this is not something which I am, making up. Now there is a whole movement. After we started these colonial narratives, I'm not taking the credit for it. I'm sure there was already other societies that were also, social groups that were also thinking about it in the UK. But now there is a whole movement to talk about the consequences of colonialism on the people of a particular country, especially India, and the consequence of the partition. When you say people didn't know, we have had scholars, you will be really shocked by this, people who have studied in Oxford and Cambridge, and it's in our notes, it's in the books and the little expressions in our guest book at the museum, where they write, I have studied in Cambridge and I had no idea that this is what happened.
So point well taken. People in Cambridge who studied in Oxford didn't know. So why would you then do a museum here? You should have done it abroad,
yes,
rather than doing it in Amritsar.
Because it's about time we took charge of our own history. This is very important, and I discovered this even when I was working on Jallianwala Bagh. The narrative for far too long has been in the hands of Western historians, and as a result of which, India and Indians are always being vilified. That it is about time that in India we started taking charge of our history, talking about what our people have gone through all these years. And especially for me, it is the partition. I'm sure there are other people who will take up other narratives. What we experienced throughout this journey is that everyone has wanted this, and they have longed for it more and more, because that generation, as I said, is already in the twilight of their years, and very soon that narrative is no longer going to exist. One point. Second point, the connection they feel with this museum, it is palpable. There is an emotive connect, but there is also a connection because this history is still contemporary. It's not so long ago. And they realize that this is something that they can all contribute towards.
Let me rephrase the question. Bitter memories, done and dusted, buried. Why would you resurrect
You know,
them
this
now?
is such a, what should I say? Most of the people whom we speak to, and as I said, you must remember, they are quite elderly. They have been through, including my own parents, a lot. Yet, today, if you ask them about Lahore, about their childhood days, about how there is absolutely no bitterness. We both knew Kuldeep Nair. One of the things that he always did his entire life was go to the border and have a
Sure.
candlelight vigil. What you said earlier is completely correct. The partition was a political move, but the people's love for each other, for affection, their desire to visit their family homes has never changed, Kumkum. And this is what the museum brings alive. It's a people's museum. We have the political narrative out there, what Mountbatten was doing, what Gandhi was doing, what Jinnah was doing. That is running in the museum so that people, historians, when they go in, they realize, yes, this is spot on, this is completely authentic. But the main part of the museum is the narrative of the people. And believe me, most of the time, I would say, almost 95% of the time, it is full of longing.
Yeah, so there is, you're right. So there is this longing, but something which is not achievable, something which is just not possible. So, there are no happy memories, no happy stories in that sense. So why are you immortalizing that?
You are again saying, that is why I would request you to come with me for some of these interviews. In fact, we're doing them even now because, that generation is fast. So our work never ends. So Kumkum, the memories, in fact, are more about love, more about longing, a lot about loss. And,
sure,
and
exactly.
This is but bitterness, I would say very little because they understood. You must remember, this was a generation that was used to sacrifice. When Gandhi said, give away your good clothes, burn your Western clothes, take off your jewelry, give it to me, etc., they did it. They did it even for the war efforts. They just, so they were used to sacrifice.
Okay, I'm not a subscriber of the Gandhian philosophy, but I agree when you say that it was about loss and longing. And that's my point. Let's change bitterness. I agree, maybe there was no bitterness. And maybe when I also said that, I didn't say bitterness. But loss, longing, something you can't get, something that's, as I said, done, dusted. Why would you immortalize that?
Because,
that is my question.
So if you look at a museum like the Holocaust Museum, which all of us have visited, which one of us has not come out or gone in there? And this loss is comparable to that, and that loss is enormous. You look at how those people were just put into trains and sent off to these concentration camps. Yeah, let me finish. That is also a museum that commemorates loss and huge loss. To commemorate loss does not mean to celebrate loss. It does not mean to impose loss. It means to understand the reasons why this loss came about. And the other narrative, I just want to correct you, it's all about this, that, okay, when you come to a museum, you will realize it was not just about violence, it's about economic loss. People who lost jobs.
Exactly my point. So it is loss. It
loss.
is economic.
But in a lot of different ways. What we do is we talk about the inspirational stories. When people lose everything, then we talk about a Dr. Manmohan Singh. Aajkal, I find it so, sad. Today we lose a mobile phone and it is like our entire world has gone topsy-turvy. People like Mr. Advani, like even Mr. Jethmalani, even Dr. Manmohan Singh, so many people who became huge and towering figures were people who were victims of the partition. Many of the industrialists today, but they rose above that. So there are many lessons, they're inspirational stories. Don't dismiss this because this is very crucial today when we have no heroes left. That is a very important lesson that the museum gives.
Kishwar, you and I are saying the same thing, except you're trying to make it sound positive while I am giving you the critic's point of it being
It's
a
fine.
negative
You know,
exercise.
Kumkum, we have been through a lot doing this museum. I think for me, the biggest support, it's not been easy because the government gave us the building, but we had to raise the money, we had to raise the collections, we had to, in that way, it is quite a unique museum. And a lot of the people who came forward were extremely supportive. But of course, there would be people who would say what you're saying. But now, 3 or 4 years down the line, the museum is a recognized entity. So I think we have at least managed to put the story of the people who suffered in the partition and how they rose from the dust. One thing which we have been very careful with this museum, we could have been very sensational about this, but I don't think we need to be. That is what the West has done. Let them do it. We need to be.
Kishwar,
We need to be respectful.
You can't dismiss criticism by saying it's a Western narrative. It isn't. It's a reality. You and I can agree to disagree
No,
on
we
that.
used to criticism. वो तो सब
Yeah.
चलता ही रहता है.
But what I'm going to say sounds morbid, it sounds horrible, but I'm still going to ask you. A union minister once told me that the Partition Museum is actually, and I'm sorry to use that word, cashing in on the dead. What would you say to that?
We have had union ministers visiting our museum, extremely moved by what they see. We've had a president.
let's talk about this
No.
criticism.
Let me just say, the problem in this country is that nobody accepts that there can be another point of view. If somebody very important has said something, then that can be the only point of view. But as a journalist, and I've also been one, I think you should respectfully agree, and I will also respectfully agree, that there are always two points of view.
Sure.
Kumkum, just as you have one minister saying something, I can give you, and I will not name them, a list of at least 300 parliamentarians who have themselves commemorated, if not privately, but congratulated us and said that this was long pending.
To my mind, recording partition is similar to doing a video of a cremation and playing it over and over again.
That deaths that you talk about were a part of it, but the loss was much larger than that. And I think what the museum does is actually documents not only what was happening to the people, but also to the country. As I said, when everything was divided, families were divided, and we are right now recording stories about one half of the family is in Pakistan, another half of the family lives here. So you can imagine when there are difficult times, how they can communicate and things like that. So not only were families divided, but also the country. Rashtrapati Bhavan ke sare chammach bhi divide kiye gaye. As far as the museums were concerned, that was divided. Music was divided. So there was a huge economic, cultural, and social loss to the partition, which also we document. So yes, there are stories, very sad stories, but there are also stories of people helping each other.
You're kind of unstoppable. There is a museum in Amritsar, now you're doing one in Delhi. How many more? And you're still counting.
As I keep comparing this to the Holocaust Museum, we have a narrative of history, which was imposed upon us. When I did the Jallianwala Bagh book, Kumkum, and when we did the exhibitions on Jallianwala Bagh, and again, you will say, cashing on the dead, Dyer killed 5,000 people, and you just want to talk 5,000. I mean, for God's sake, do you know till today we don't have the numbers? How can anyone even say that? And I would say the same thing about the partition. We still do not know the social, the economic, and other impacts, cultural, every kind of impact that that particular thing had.
How many more museums are you going to
No,
do?
see, I'm saying that this actually is a gift, the one which has happened in Delhi, is a gift to us in a sense that it is something which came out of the blue. Of course, it is the same way, we still have to work very hard, but it was a suggestion from people in the government themselves who said that, people in Delhi have suffered. And the partition changed and transformed. But you, because you don't believe in history, you don't believe in recording history.
Kishwar, I believe in history, I don't believe in distorted history. So let me correct that.
I think you have to believe the fact that there were refugee camps in Delhi. You have to believe the fact that many people who came into Delhi If you call this distortion, then I feel very bad for you. But these were people who came here, as I said, with nothing. Many of them had lost families, had lost lives, people of their, people they loved. And when they came here, many came as corpses, because you've heard about those trains that arrived at least up to Amritsar with, So I'm saying that a lot of Delhi was completely transformed in 1947. What you see of Delhi is an impact of that, and much of it was changed.
Let me make you a bit comfortable, something I know you would love to answer. How is the Partition Museum in Amritsar different from the one in Delhi that you're doing?
Yeah, so in Delhi, we are trying to do a sharp Delhi focus, because this particular project is called Dastane-Delhi. And when I said that this is something, it's a kind of, I feel, an acknowledgement of the people who lost everything. It is, as I said, part of a larger project, which would be a cultural hub. It's called Dastane-Delhi. It's set up as the Dara Shikoh Library Building, which is on within the Ambedkar University campus. And we'll have 3 museums there. But the main one, which will come up first, is on the partition of India, because indeed, almost entirely Delhi was transformed at that time. We have wonderful stories in the museum, how communities helped each other. And I think you will be yourself surprised at how hard people were working at that time to repair the loss that so many had grievously suffered. And I think there are many lessons to be learned from this, Kumkum. But one of the lessons to be learned is not to be dismissive.
I'm going to take a long time to not be dismissive, but let me come to your marriage to Meghnad Desai. It was after you got married to him, and I've said this to you before also. You discovered yourself as an author, the Gandhi statue, the Partition Museum, and much more, and still counting, as I said. Why did you take so long to discover yourself?
No, I think this is again your narrative, not mine. Kumkum, one has done a lot of things, and I won't go into that, because I think that is what you become eventually is what you become. It's a journey that takes place, whether you do it with someone or there are dreams you have which can be only fulfilled at a particular time in your life. Always wonderful to have a supportive partner. But I was already thinking of becoming an author before I met Meghnad. I was tired of television and I wanted to move on. So I think those are the things which were probably, we had commonalities, we were able to understand each other very well. And that always helps. If you want to do something which is risky and so on, it's always nice to have somebody with you who says, no, it's a good idea, go ahead. Yeah.
Your marriage to Meghnad was written about. Would you call it a fairy tale wedding, or would you say it was controversial?
Well, you were there, Kumkum. You had our first party before we kind of eloped. I think we are very, we are very happy from day one together. So I'm not quite sure what makes a fairy tale wedding. A lot of fairy tales have very crazy, beginnings and crazy ends. I don't know where our relationship will be, 10 years from now, 20. But I think we have a very good marriage. So touch wood, yes. And we understand each other very well, and we support each other. And I think that's what makes, if not a fairy tale wedding, certainly a good marriage.
You told me, and this is what you've said on record, that the first thing you noticed about Meghnad were his curly silver soft hair.
Yeah, that was really sweet, because, he had this lovely, lovely halo of white hair. And I was, yes, everybody notices. I think that not just me, everyone, including my mother, who wanted to know whether it was real, because she couldn't believe that anyone could have hair like this.
And then you told Meghnad up front, I cannot have an affair with you, you better look somewhere else.
Yes, I mean, that was something, because, this is Delhi, and we just didn't want gossip, and I didn't want any of that. I had a full life in Delhi, even before he turned up in my life. I had many things I was doing, and so I just wanted a peaceful life. I didn't want to have any ups and downs in it, and so that's how we got married. He said, no, I want to marry you, so that was it.
Would you agree that the marriage has brought out the best in you?
I think so. I would like to imagine that it has brought out the best in both of us, though he was already pretty much perfect in that department. He's a very, very nice man, and I'm lucky to have him as a husband.
After both of you signed the marriage register, Meghnad took out a dibya from his pocket. You thought it was a ring, but it happened to be sindoor.
Very sweet, yeah. I think it was lovely because we were in the registry in London, and that is not a common thing that happens there, is somebody putting sindoor, yes.
So you didn't get the ring then. Did you get the solitaire later?
We got, yes, I think Meghnad had brought a solitaire with him. The first time round, he's a very forgetful professor. So the first time round, he arrived in Delhi and he was supposed to be carrying the solitaire that he'd picked up. He forgot it somewhere in London, so he arrived without one. The second time round, yes, when we went back, then I was given that. But unfortunately, I think somewhere along the way, it got lost, sadly enough.
Now about your books. Your latest, The Longest Kiss. Why did you do that? You're a generation apart from Devika Rani. You probably grew up or maybe not there when she was there. So why Devika Rani and how did you think of her?
I think maybe after the conversation with you, I'm beginning to feel कि मुझे पुरानी चीज़ों से बहुत प्यार है. तो आज का जो ज़माना, actually it's true. I have a weird nostalgia for things in the past. I have a lot of love and affection for the way things were. I love listening to purane gaane, purani stories. I like to read about how people used to live. So I think there is a fascination within me for that period, which no longer exists. In this mad life of ours, it is, things are very ephemeral. They come and they go. There is no constancy in what we do today. So I think somebody like Devika, when I stumbled upon her story, one was, of course, she's a woman, so it appealed to me a lot. And I did find that she was a very modern person for her time, for the 20s, 30s, 40s, the kind of things that she did. And that, for me, again, is somebody really worth looking at. As a journalist, as you know as well, we look for the unusual stories. And she was such an unusual person. I felt she deserved a book.
Your earlier book was Sunil Dutt and Nargis.
Yeah.
So why this, if I may use the word, obsession with glamour in films?
That was not my idea, I have to say, because that film, book actually came out of a conversation that Meghnad and I had had before we got married. And he's the film buff, actually, not me. I became an accidental film buff. I always enjoyed cinema, and I always wrote the odd review here and there, loved watching movies. But writing about Nargis was something that he wanted to do. And I think it was partly a way to, because we used to have these long conversations about the books we'd write together. So it was meant to be a book that Meghnad and I were supposed to write together whenever we were together. And it became a book that I wrote.
Does he help you in your writing? And don't kill me, but I have to ask what some of your critics say. That some of your books are ghost-written.
By Meghnad?
I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know by Meghnad.
Never,
but this is...
serious criticism?
Not, but what I've heard. I would not say it's serious, but what I've heard.
No, this is complete nonsense. Anyone who has seen me work, and that's pretty easy to see me work because that is a time when I'm locked into my house. And it really doesn't matter who is there. Of course, it's lovely when Meghnad is there because he cooks for me. But if he's busy with his own book, which he usually is. So we are both writers and we both have our corners in the house. We work separately. And I work with a huge amount. I write very differently from the way Meghnad. So he would not even be able to cope with the way I write.
Would you rate yourself as a popular writer or an author who's profound?
I don't have any such pretensions. I really am very happy and pleased if people read my books. Bas. वो कौन पढ़ रहा है, क्यों पढ़ रहे हैं, मुझे नहीं मालूम. I'm just grateful to God to have the opportunity to express myself, and there is a publisher willing to publish me.
Kishwar Desai, thank you very much, and best of luck for the museum in Delhi, which you are doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Kumkum. Always wonderful to talk to you.